Eli was not expecting much when he took off for his usual deep space run. As a pilot, his job was simple: deliver cargo between the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But this time, things would be different. As his ship hummed through the quiet darkness of space, an unusual blip appeared on his radar. At first, he thought it was just another glitch, but the signal grew stronger. Intrigued, he adjusted his ship's course and followed the source of the signal. His ship cut through the thick nebula, the glowing dust clouds swirling in the blackness. The closer he got, the more strange the signal seemed, almost like a beacon. "What are you exactly?" Eli muttered to himself as he adjusted the controls. He wasn't one to back away from a mystery, especially when it meant a new discovery. The ship's scanners didn't help much. There was no sign of life, but there was something hidden in the clouds, something large. He set his ship on autopilot and peered out into the shimmering fog of space. Eli's brow furrowed as he saw the outline of what appeared to be a massive wrecked ship. It wasn't like anything he had ever seen before: sleek, elegant, and ancient-looking. The ship appeared to be abandoned, drifting aimlessly through the nebula. "What happened here?" Eli whispered, his heart beating faster. He had seen enough wreckage in his time, but this was different. The structure of the ship was almost otherworldly. It looked like it belonged to an advanced civilization far beyond the human race. Without thinking much more about it, Eli made a decision. He had to investigate. His curiosity drove him. It wasn't often a pilot like him stumbled upon something so mysterious. He guided his ship toward the wreck, deciding to dock with it. There was no response on the comms, and the ship didn't seem to be functional, so it felt like the safest option. He floated closer, easing his ship toward the darkened bay. Inside the wreckage, everything seemed to be in a state of decay. The air was stale, and there was a strange energy lingering in the atmosphere. Yet, despite the lifeless surroundings, Eli felt an odd sense of calm. "Let's see what we've got here," he muttered as he suited up in his spacesuit. He boarded the wreck cautiously, stepping out onto the dark, quiet corridors of the ship. The walls were smooth and polished, despite their age. There were no signs of life, and yet there was something about this place that felt alive. It was as if the ship itself held a secret, waiting to be uncovered. As Eli moved deeper into the ship, he came across a small chamber at the core of the vessel. The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a room that looked more like a temple than a spaceship. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, glowing faintly in a language Eli didn't recognize. There, lying at the center of the room, was a figure. The figure was tall, elegant, and radiant, with wings made of light. It was a woman, or what appeared to be a woman, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with a celestial glow. Her face was serene, eyes closed in what looked like a deep sleep. Eli froze. He had never seen anything like this before. He was no expert in alien species, but he could tell that this being was far beyond anything he could imagine. She wasn't human, but she seemed divine in a way. He stepped forward carefully, not wanting to disturb the scene. The being's wings fluttered slightly, as if sensing his presence. Eli's heart raced. "What in the stars?" he whispered. Just as he was about to reach out, the figure's eyes opened, glowing with an intense, otherworldly light. Eli stepped back in surprise. The woman, now awake, looked straight at him, her gaze filled with both surprise and something more, something ancient and wise. "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice gentle but commanding, as if it carried the weight of the universe. Eli could barely find his voice. I'm Eli. I didn't mean to disturb you. I just found your ship. I thought it was abandoned," he stammered, unsure how to explain his presence. The woman studied him for a moment, then tilted her head. "I am Alara, an angel of the celestial order. I was in deep slumber until you awoke me." Eli blinked. An angel? He could barely wrap his mind around the idea. Was she some sort of advanced alien, or something entirely different? "I don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "How did I wake you? What is this place?" Alara's gaze softened, and she slowly rose from the ground, her wings spreading wide, radiating a soft light. "This is my sanctuary, a place of rest between the worlds. But now you have brought me into the world of mortals, and the balance has been disturbed. The galaxy will soon feel the consequences of your actions." Eli's heart sank. What had he done? He hadn't meant to bring trouble. All he had done was follow a strange signal. But now, it seemed, he had awoken something far bigger than himself. Alara looked at him with a knowing expression, as if understanding his confusion. "You are the one who will carry the weight of this, Eli. The galaxy will soon know of your presence, and mine." As the weight of her words sank in, Eli suddenly realized that his life had just changed forever. Eli's mind raced. The shock of meeting Alara, the angelic being, was still fresh, and now she was saying that the galaxy was about to feel the consequences of his actions. He tried to understand what she meant, but the weight of her words hung heavily on him. He had always thought of space as a vast, empty place, full of wonders, yes, but also peaceful and calm. Now it seemed that peace was about to shatter. Alara stood tall, her wings still glowing softly, her eyes focused on the distant stars outside the wrecked ship. "You don't understand yet, do you, Eli?" she said, her voice calm but filled with an ancient sorrow. "The celestial beings, my kind, have kept the balance of this galaxy for millennia. We protect it, guide it, and ensure that no force becomes too powerful. But now, with me awake, things will change." Eli swallowed hard, his palms sweating. He had no idea what she was talking about. What did it mean for the galaxy to be in balance? Why was he involved? "I never meant to wake you," Eli said, his voice sounding small in the vastness of the wreck. "I just found your ship. I didn't know what it was. I didn't think this would happen." Alara turned to face him. Her eyes glowed with a soft light, as if she could see into his very soul. "It's not your fault, Eli, but it's too late now. The moment you touched the artifact, you set in motion forces that cannot be undone." Eli glanced nervously at the glowing device in the center of the room, the one he had accidentally activated when he first entered the ship. It was still humming, almost like it had a life of its own. "What is that thing?" Eli asked. "The artifact," Alara answered, "was created long ago by the ancient ones who first formed the celestial order. It holds immense power, far beyond what mortals like you can imagine. That power was meant to remain sealed, but you, unwittingly, have opened it. And now it calls to those who would use it for their own ends." Eli frowned. "Who are these people? Who wants to use it?" "Your galaxy is full of many races and factions," Alara said, "some peaceful, others destructive. There is one empire, ruthless and hungry for power, that will stop at nothing to control the celestial power. They are led by a tyrant, a man named Kel, who seeks to bend the very stars to his will. He will come for you, Eli, and he will stop at nothing to take me and the artifact." A chill ran down Eli's spine. He had heard rumors about powerful factions and ruthless leaders in the galaxy, but never had he imagined he would be caught up in something so dangerous. "So, they'll come for you. And then what?" Eli asked, trying to make sense of it all. Alara's wings fluttered, and her expression hardened. "If they capture me, they will use my power to start a war that will engulf every star system, every planet. Thousands, maybe millions, will die in the chaos that follows. This is why I was in hiding, Eli. I was the last guardian of balance. My kind is not meant to be seen, but to guide, to protect from the shadows." Eli felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He never wanted to be part of something so destructive. "What can we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How do we stop them?" Alara's eyes softened. "It will not be easy. The Empire will track us down, and Kel will stop at nothing. But there is hope. There are those who oppose him, factions of rebels, resistance groups. Together, we may have a chance to fight back. Eli nodded, though doubt lingered in his mind. How could he, just a pilot, help in a war like this? He wasn't a soldier, or a leader, or even someone important. Yet, somehow, fate had pulled him into this battle. Just then, the ship's sensors beeped loudly, interrupting their conversation. Eli rushed to the console, his heart pounding in his chest. The signal. It was back. The same strange energy signature. But this time, it was closer. Someone's coming, Eli said urgently. It's not the Empire yet, but we're not alone. Alara stepped closer, her expression grim. It may be scouts. They've likely detected the artifact's activation and are searching for us. We need to leave now. Eli quickly made his way to the cockpit, his mind racing. The wrecked ship wasn't exactly equipped for a fight, but it was all they had. He fired up the engines and engaged the thrusters, trying to get some distance from the wreck. But the ship was sluggish, damaged from its crash and age. The pursuit was inevitable. As he pulled the ship into deep space, he noticed several ships emerging from the nebula behind them. Sleek, dark vessels. They were fast, and they were coming right at them. How do we fight them off? Eli asked, his voice shaking with fear. Alara placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to fight them, Eli. You just need to run. But as the enemy ships closed in, Eli knew that running might not be enough. He had no choice but to take a stand. The galaxy was about to change forever. And so was his life. Eli's hands gripped the controls tightly as the enemy ships closed in on them. His mind raced with thoughts of escape. He had never been in a situation like this before. He was just a cargo pilot, not someone who fought battles or dealt with warlords. Yet here he was, caught in the middle of a galactic conflict, with an angelic being by his side. The enemy ships were getting closer, and their dark shapes loomed ominously on the ship's radar. Alara stood beside him, her wings flickering with a soft light, but her expression was serious. We can't outrun them, Eli said, his voice tight with panic. They're faster than we are. We need a plan. Alara's eyes glowed with a calm, focused intensity. Don't worry, Eli. I can help, but you need to trust me. I will protect us. Eli glanced at her, unsure what she meant. How are you going to do that? We're not even armed. She looked out of the window, her gaze unwavering. The power inside me is not just for protection. It can be used to protect this ship, to give us an advantage. But we must act quickly. Before Eli could ask more, Alara raised her hands, and a soft, glowing energy surrounded her. The air inside the cockpit seemed to shimmer as she whispered words in a language Eli didn't understand. Suddenly, the ship's shields flickered to life, glowing a soft blue. The instruments on the console beeped as they powered up. That should hold them off for a while, Alara said calmly. But we need to leave this area. Their sensors will soon detect the shield's energy signature. Eli didn't hesitate. He pushed the throttle forward, sending the ship hurtling deeper into space, hoping to outrun the pursuers. The enemy ships were fast, but Eli wasn't without skills. He had flown through asteroid fields, navigated dangerous nebulae, and dodged countless space debris. This time, though, there was something different, something much more dangerous. As they sped through the void of space, Eli kept his eyes on the radar. The enemy ships were still tracking them, their movements precise and calculated. He could feel the tension in the air, a sense that they were being hunted. How far are we from the nearest planet? Eli asked, trying to think of a place to hide. Not far, Alara replied, her voice steady. There is a small colony on a moon nearby. It's a place where we might be able to find shelter, if we're lucky. Eli nodded, pushing the ship even harder. The sleek vessels chasing them weren't giving up. The dark ships darted through space with a frightening speed, closing the distance between them. Alara's wings fluttered, and the glow around her grew brighter. You need to trust me, Eli. I will help you. Just keep flying. Eli couldn't help but wonder what kind of power Alara had inside her. She spoke with such confidence, as though she could handle anything. Still, he wasn't sure how long the ship's shields would last against an attack, or if they'd even make it to the moon. It felt like time was running out. Then, without warning, one of the enemy ships fired. The blast hit their shields with a sharp electric shock, shaking the entire ship. Eli gripped the controls harder, trying to keep the ship steady. The lights flickered, and the console beeped loudly as the shield took the full impact of the blast. "Stay focused," Alara commanded, her voice sharp. She raised her hands again, and the glow around her intensified. The ship's shields repaired themselves, but they were weaker now. Another hit like that, and they wouldn't last. "We're almost there," Eli said, his voice tight. He could see the moon now, a small rocky world hanging in the distance. The colony was a speck on the surface, barely visible from space, but it was their only hope. The enemy ships fired again, and this time, the blast was stronger. The shields flickered, barely holding together as the ship was rocked once more. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. They needed to get there, fast. "Alara," Eli called, panic creeping into his voice. "Can you make the ship go faster?" Alara's eyes flashed with determination. She closed her eyes for a moment, and a surge of energy pulsed through the ship. The engines roared to life, and the ship shot forward, faster than before. But the enemy ships were relentless. "We can't let them catch us," Alara said, her voice unwavering. "I'm going to push the shield to its limit. Stay steady." Eli nodded, his hand still gripping the controls. He focused on the moon, keeping his eyes fixed on their destination. The colony was so close now, just a little farther. Another blast hit, and this time the shields cracked. The ship shuddered violently, and Eli struggled to keep it on course. His heart raced as he fought to maintain control. The enemy ships were closing in, their weapons primed for another attack. With a final, desperate push, Eli threw the ship into a sharp dive toward the moon's surface. The enemy ships followed, but they were too late. Just as Eli's ship broke through the atmosphere, he felt the weight of the chase lift. The enemy ships were left behind, unable to follow into the dense atmosphere. The ship shook violently as it entered the moon's atmosphere, but Eli kept his focus, guiding the ship toward the colony below. The ground rushed up to meet them, and with a final burst of speed, the ship touched down roughly, sending up a cloud of dust. They had made it, for now. Eli slumped back in his seat, his body shaking with exhaustion. He didn't know how long they would be safe here, but for the moment, they were alive. Alara turned to him, her expression softening. "We've made it, Eli. But the battle is far from over. Kel will not stop." Eli nodded grimly, knowing she was right. The galaxy was changing, and whether he was ready or not, he was now part of something much bigger than himself. The sound of the approaching ship grew louder, echoing through the small building. Eli's heart pounded in his chest as he exchanged a quick look with Alara. She was already moving toward the door, her glowing wings folding tightly against her back, as if ready to take flight. "We need to go now," Alara whispered, her voice steady but urgent. Eli didn't hesitate. He grabbed his bag and followed her to the door. As he reached for the handle, he heard the unmistakable hum of engines shutting down. They had no time to waste. "Where are we going?" Eli asked as they moved quickly down the narrow hallway of the building, staying low to avoid being seen. "There's a hidden path beneath the colony," Alara replied, her pace swift and graceful. "It leads to the outer rim of the moon. We can use it to escape before they find us." "Hidden path," Eli repeated, confused. "You mean you've been here before?" Alara didn't answer right away, but her eyes flickered with something. Was it regret? "I've been here before, yes, but it's not safe to talk about it. Not now." Eli didn't press her further. He had learned over the past few days that Alara was full of mysteries, and he didn't want to risk pushing her too hard. Besides, their immediate concern was survival, not asking too many questions. They reached the back of the building, where a heavy steel door awaited them. Alara placed her hand on a hidden panel, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for the two of them to squeeze through. "This way," Alara said, moving into the darkness. Eli followed closely behind, his hand resting on the side of the tunnel for balance. The air inside was cold and stale, but he didn't care. He had been in worse places before. What mattered now was getting as far away from the colony as possible. They moved through the tunnel in silence, the only sound their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The further they went, the more Eli could feel the tension building between them. The hunt was on, and they were running out of time. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a small cavern. Eli's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw a large, rusted hatch in the center of the room. It was a hidden escape route, one that had been used by the colony's residents when they needed to flee in a hurry. "Is this it?" Eli asked, his voice quiet. Alara nodded. "This will take us to the outer rim. We'll need to be quick." She moved toward the hatch and began working on the controls. Eli could see the sweat on her brow, and for the first time, he realized how much pressure she was under. They were both under pressure, but he could see the determination in her eyes. With a loud click, the hatch opened, revealing a steep ramp leading down to the surface of the moon. The cold, dusty landscape stretched out before them, and Eli could see the faint glow of distant mountains in the horizon. "Let's go," Alara said, her voice firm. Eli didn't need any more encouragement. They sprinted down the ramp and onto the surface, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the soft dust beneath their feet. The sky above them was dark, with only the faintest light from distant stars illuminating the barren landscape. They didn't stop running. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat, and every distant noise made Eli's heart race. The colony had been a trap, and they had narrowly escaped it. But now, the real danger awaited them. As they moved across the rocky terrain, Eli could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Kel's forces were out there, and they were hunting him. They were hunting Alara. They needed to find a way off the moon, and fast. "Do you have a plan?" Eli asked, his breath coming in short gasps. Alara's eyes were scanning the horizon, her mind clearly elsewhere. She seemed to be looking for something, but what? "There's a freighter on the other side of the moon," she said, her voice steady. "I know it's Captain. We can get off this moon if we can reach it." Eli didn't hesitate. "Then let's get moving." They picked up their pace, moving faster now, driven by the knowledge that every second they wasted brought Cal's men closer. The wind whipped at their faces as they ran, the vast emptiness of the moon stretching out in all directions. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time felt irrelevant now. The only thing that mattered was reaching the freighter before it was too late. As they reached the top of a ridge, Eli spotted the freighter in the distance. It was a small ship, barely visible against the darkened landscape, but it was there, a beacon of hope. "That's it," Eli exclaimed, pointing toward the ship. Alara nodded, her pace quickening. But as they moved closer, Eli could see something else. Movement in the shadows, figures emerging from behind the rocks. They were surrounded. Cal's men. Alara muttered under her breath. Eli's heart sank. They had come so far, only to be trapped again. But this time, there was no way out. Alara turned to him, her eyes glowing with determination. "We fight," she said simply. Eli swallowed hard. He had no weapons, no armor, and no experience in combat. But Alara was an angel, an alien angel, capable of things he couldn't even begin to understand. And she had already saved his life more than once. Maybe it was time to return the favor. The ship's landing wasn't smooth, but it had done the job. Eli exhaled, his chest tight from the stress of the escape. He looked out the window of the cockpit, his eyes scanning the barren landscape of the moon. The colony was just ahead, a small cluster of buildings tucked into the side of a rocky hill. It wasn't much, but it was their best chance at surviving for now. Alara was already standing by the door, her glowing wings folding neatly behind her. She looked at Eli with a calm expression, but there was a glint of worry in her eyes. "We need to move quickly," she said, her voice low. "This place may seem quiet, but Kel's forces are always watching. They will find us if we stay here too long." Eli nodded, pushing himself out of his seat. He felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had barely escaped the enemy ships, and now they were on a strange moon, unsure of what dangers lay ahead. He grabbed his pack, checking to make sure everything was secure before heading toward the exit. As soon as the ramp lowered, a cold gust of wind swept over them, carrying with it the scent of dust and metal. The colony, though small, was a bustling place. People moved between buildings, their faces drawn with worry. Eli didn't know if they had any idea of the war brewing in the galaxy, but the tension in the air was palpable. Alara stepped down first, her wings brushing against the ground. She scanned the area with sharp eyes, her expression unreadable. Eli followed, staying close behind. His hand hovered over the weapon at his side, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. A man in a weathered uniform approached them. His face was rough, as if life had been hard on him. He looked Eli up and down before nodding. "You're not from around here," the man said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "You're lucky to have made it this far. This moon's not exactly a safe haven." "We're just passing through," Eli replied quickly. "We need to lay low for a while." The man studied him for a moment before turning his gaze to Alara. His eyes widened, but he didn't say anything. Eli could feel the weight of the stare, and he suddenly understood why the man had reacted the way he did. Alara's glowing wings, her otherworldly presence, were impossible to ignore. "We can help you," the man said after a long pause, "but you'll need to be careful. There are rumors of a war coming, and if Kel's men are after you, this place may not be safe for long." Eli exchanged a quick glance with Alara. Her face was unreadable, but he knew she was thinking the same thing. They couldn't stay here forever. The war was already on their doorstep. "We appreciate the offer," Alara said softly, her voice carrying an otherworldly calm. "But we can't afford to stay too long. We're being hunted, and we need to find a way off this moon. Fast." The man nodded, understanding. He turned and motioned for them to follow. "Follow me. I know a place where you can rest and plan your next move." They walked through the narrow streets of the colony, the buildings crumbling and patched together in an almost haphazard way. It was clear that resources were scarce here, but the people were used to it. They had learned how to survive. As they approached the small building at the edge of the colony, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced around, his instincts on high alert. He was used to the quiet, peaceful life of a cargo pilot. But this was different. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and they were caught right in the middle. Inside the building, the man led them to a small room with a worn table and chairs. "This is as safe as it gets," he said. "You can rest here, but be ready. You never know when trouble will find its way to you." Eli nodded, his eyes scanning the room. There were no windows, but the walls seemed sturdy enough. It was a place to catch their breath, but it wouldn't be enough to hide for long. "Thank you," Alara said, her voice warm but distant. "We won't be here for long. We just need to plan our next steps." The man nodded and left, closing the door behind him. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the ship's systems and the faint whispers of distant voices outside. Eli sat down at the table, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to do next," he admitted. "I never wanted to be part of a war. But now I can't just sit by and do nothing." Alara stood by the door, her back straight and her gaze focused. "You're not just a passenger in this war, Eli. You have a role to play. You are the one who brought me here, and that means you are part of something bigger than you realize." Eli looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Alara turned to him, her eyes glowing softly. "I was sent here for a reason. The galaxy needs change, and you, together with me, can be the catalyst for that change." Eli didn't understand, but he could feel the weight of her words. He had no choice but to trust her. After all, she had saved his life more than once already, and now he had to help her fulfill whatever mission she was on. "All right," Eli said finally, standing up. "Let's figure this out. Together." As they prepared to leave the room, the distant rumble of a ship's engines reached their ears. Eli's heart sank. The calm was over. The hunt was about to begin again. Alara's eyes narrowed. They'd found us. The tension in the air was thick as Eli and Alara stood at the top of the ridge, facing the soldiers emerging from the shadows. Their boots crunched against the dry moon dust, and the sound of their weapons being readied echoed in the cold night. Eli's pulse raced in his chest as he scanned the growing circle of enemies around them. Alara's glowing wings flickered in the dim light, but she remained calm, calculating her moves with the precision of someone who had faced danger before. Eli, on the other hand, felt a wave of panic rise inside him. He had no combat experience, no weapons, and no real plan. But he wasn't about to give up now, not after everything they had been through. "Stay close," Alara whispered, her voice steady despite the danger. "I'll handle them." Eli nodded, unsure of what else to do. He had no idea what Alara was capable of, but if she was an angel, as she had hinted before, then he knew she had abilities beyond anything he could imagine. He had to trust her. The soldiers, all wearing the same dark uniforms with insignias Eli didn't recognize, moved closer, their faces shadowed under helmets. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. He didn't speak at first, just watching them with cold, calculating eyes. "This is your last chance," the leader said, his voice gravelly. "Surrender, and we'll make your death quick. Resist, and I promise it'll be painful." Alara's wings flared out, her eyes narrowing. "I don't think you understand," she said, her voice calm but filled with an edge of fury. "We're not the ones who will be dying today." Before Eli could process her words, Alara moved with lightning speed. Her wings shot out, sending a gust of wind that knocked the first soldier off his feet. In a blur, she was on him, her glowing hands crackling with energy. The soldier gasped, his body jolting as Alara's powers surged through him. And with a quick movement, she incapacitated him without causing permanent harm. The others reacted instantly, raising their weapons and aiming at Alara. Eli froze, his mind racing as he watched her fight. This was no ordinary human woman. She was powerful, graceful, and terrifying in the way she moved. But she couldn't fight them all alone. Eli had to do something. Without thinking, he grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the nearest soldier. The rock struck the soldier's helmet with a sharp clang, startling him for a moment. It wasn't much, but it was enough to distract the soldier long enough for Eli to grab a metal pipe lying nearby. His grip was shaky, but the weight of it made him feel a little better. He swung the pipe at the next soldier, catching him off guard and sending him sprawling to the ground. The soldier's weapon fell from his hands, and Eli quickly picked it up, holding it awkwardly as he tried to steady his breath. His heart was pounding, but now he knew there was no turning back. He was in this fight whether he was ready or not. Alara, seeing that Eli had found his courage, turned her attention to the rest of the attackers. With a series of precise movements, she dispatched 2 more soldiers, her wings cutting through the air like blades. The soldiers' attempts to retaliate were futile as Alara danced around them, her movements fluid and swift. She was a blur of light and power, and it was almost impossible for Eli to keep up with her. But he didn't have to. His job was to hold his ground, protect her if necessary, and survive. The ship was just beyond them, and it was their only hope. The longer they stayed here, the more dangerous it became. The leader of the soldiers, growing frustrated, barked an order for them to close in. Take them both down. Don't let them escape. But Alara wasn't giving them the chance. She lunged forward with a speed that left Eli breathless, knocking the leader's weapon out of his hands and sending him stumbling backward. In a single fluid motion, she landed a powerful blow to his chest, sending him crashing into the dust. The leader groaned, clearly stunned, but he was still alive. Leave him, Alara told Eli, her eyes flashing. We don't have time to waste. Eli hesitated for a moment. The leader had been the most dangerous of them all. But Alara was right. They couldn't afford to get bogged down by more fighting. The ship was waiting, and they had to reach it before reinforcements arrived. Come on, Eli shouted, his voice hoarse. He grabbed Alara's arm and pulled her toward the ridge. They had a head start, but the soldiers weren't far behind. Alara's wings spread wide again, and she used them to propel herself forward, her speed increasing. Eli, struggling to keep up, followed closely behind, running as fast as he could. The freighter was still within reach, and he could hear the distant sound of its engines idling. Behind them, the soldiers recovered quickly. Their leader was on his feet again, shouting orders to the remaining soldiers. After them. Don't let them escape. The urgency in the leader's voice spurred Eli to run faster, and Alara was already beside him, her energy seemingly boundless. She was the one leading the charge, but Eli was no longer a mere passenger. He was in this fight now, and he wasn't going to stop until they were safe. As they neared the freighter, Eli saw that the hatch was still closed. But there was no time to worry about that now. They had to get inside before the soldiers reached them. The final stretch felt like an eternity, but they were so close. Almost there, Alara said, her voice low but filled with determination. Eli nodded, pushing his legs harder. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but he kept going. The freighter was within arm's reach now. They could make it. Just as the soldiers closed the gap, Eli and Alara dove toward the open hatch, tumbling inside just as the first shot rang out. The hatch slammed shut behind them, sealing out the threat. Inside the freighter, they collapsed against the walls, gasping for breath. They had made it, this time. But they both knew it wasn't over yet. The war was just beginning. The interior of the freighter hummed with life as Eli and Alara caught their breath, their hearts still racing from the intense escape. The hatch had sealed shut behind them, and the immediate threat of the soldiers had been momentarily blocked. But neither of them relaxed. The war was far from over. Eli, still gripping the weapon he had picked up, glanced over at Alara, who was now leaning against the wall, her wings folded behind her. She appeared tired, but there was a fire in her eyes, an unmistakable determination. We made it inside, Eli said, his voice hoarse from the exertion. But I don't think that's the end of it. Alara nodded slowly. They won't stop chasing us. The leaders of their forces will send more ships, more soldiers. But we have an advantage. Eli raised an eyebrow. An advantage. Our ship. Alara explained, her gaze shifting to the cockpit. It's not just any freighter. It's equipped with the technology we need to get away, to protect ourselves and strike back. Eli's pulse quickened at her words. You mean we can actually fight back? Yes, Alara said with a grim smile. But we have to reach the command center first and initiate the ship's defenses, and we have to be quick before they catch up with us. Eli looked around the dimly lit freighter. Despite its worn appearance, there was an aura of potential that stirred something inside him. They weren't helpless. Not anymore. Let's do it, Eli said, his voice full of newfound resolve. He knew this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for something bigger. Alara nodded and led the way toward the command center at the front of the ship. As they walked, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every second they spent on the ship was another second closer to the enemy catching up with them. The corridors of the freighter were narrow, lit by faint, flickering lights that cast eerie shadows on the metal walls. The sounds of the ship's engines and the distant hum of its systems were a constant reminder of their situation, isolated in the vastness of space with danger closing in. As they reached the command center, Alara stepped up to the control panel and began typing commands with swift precision. Eli watched her, impressed by the ease with which she navigated the complex interface. It was clear that she was in control. "This is it," Alara said, her fingers hovering over the buttons. "Once we engage the ship's defense systems, we can take the fight to them." Eli nodded, his heart pounding. "Do it." Alara pressed the final button, and the ship's systems came to life with a low, powerful hum. The panels on the walls lit up, displaying holographic maps of the surrounding space. Eli could see the outline of enemy ships closing in on their position, their numbers growing by the second. "We've activated the cloaking system," Alara explained. "We're invisible to them for now, but it won't last forever." Eli glanced at the map. The enemy ships were dangerously close. He couldn't believe how quickly the situation had escalated. What had started as a simple rescue mission had turned into a full-blown galactic conflict. "We need a plan," Eli said. "We can't just run. We need to strike first." Alara turned to face him, her expression serious. "I agree, but we'll need to disable their flagship. If we do that, the rest of their fleet will fall apart. But it's risky. The flagship is heavily guarded." Eli swallowed hard. The weight of their situation was dawning on him. He wasn't just a civilian anymore. He was part of a larger fight, a fight for freedom, for the future. And if he didn't act now, he might lose everything. "We don't have a choice," Eli said firmly. "We do what we have to." With a few quick commands, Alara set the course for the enemy flagship. The freighter's engines roared to life, and they shot forward, cloaked and ready to strike. As they approached the flagship, the tension in the air was palpable. Eli's mind raced with thoughts of what might happen. He had no experience with space battles or advanced technology, but the way Alara had handled herself so far gave him hope. If anyone could do this, it was her. The ship grew larger on the map, and Eli could feel the adrenaline building in his veins. They were close now. The enemy ships still hadn't detected them, but it wouldn't be long before they did. They had only one shot at this. "Prepare for impact," Alara said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. "We'll have to hit them hard and fast." Eli nodded, gripping the control panel beside him. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. This was their last chance. If they didn't stop the flagship, the war would only escalate, and countless innocent lives would be lost. With a swift motion, Alara engaged the ship's weapons system, and a powerful blast shot toward the enemy flagship. The ship's shields shimmered briefly before collapsing under the force of the attack. Eli held his breath, watching the flagship's defenses weaken. This was their moment. The battle had begun.